Well, well, well. What do we have here? A holodeck episode. Maybe y'all should stop trusting in the holodeck. If I was you, I'd never be getting in that thing ever again. So this is episode 6 of Lower Decks, called Terminal Provocations. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and give you the bottom line up front. Overall, I'd say this episode was funny, but formulaic, lighthearted, and a little bit too referential for me. Getting a little bit tired of the name drops, a little bit tired of the fact that they mentioned Q in this episode like 4 times. That's enough. This one's looking like a 7, which is good. You know, and if I was rating this as just an episode of television, you know, it's probably a 5-er, but I'm starved for decent Star Trek, and I think when you look at it in that context, I'm feeling it's a 7. So let's run through the basic summary of this episode, shall we? At the beginning of this episode, we have an intro, a section that occurs before the title sequence. Last episode didn't have it. This one did. This one was about the crew humming their different interpretations of warp engine sound, and it wasn't funny. I didn't laugh at it. It's pretty low tier as far as pre-intro sequences go. Take it or leave it. Anyway, the episode starts with something called a Drukemani, which is some type of alien. Perhaps we've seen it before. I don't know. This alien vessel is laying claim to what is clearly Starfleet salvage. They call it cargo. And basically they get into a struggle over who owns it. That's essentially the bridge plot for this episode. And that's really as complicated as that plot gets. They're arguing with one another. They get into a tractor beam struggle, which is pretty funny. But ultimately what happens is the Drukemani vessel starts turning their tractor beam inverted into a repulsor, and they start firing the salvage into the Cerritos as a way to attack it. And the Cerritos, being the legal eagle here, doesn't want to make any kind of provocation, and they won't even respond in any way, because frankly, I think the Cerritos could absolutely destroy the Drukemani vessel. So, discretion being the better part of valor, they decide not to take the upper hand in this fight, which is cool. I can respect that, and my captain respects that too. But later on, we're introduced to another crewman called Fletcher. And basically, Fletcher, it's hard to put a pin on him, but he's kind of like if Barclay was a little bit smarter, I guess you could say, if you remember Barclay from The Next Generation. A few Barclay references in this episode. One of them, Rutherford is referring to different things you can do in a holodeck, and one of them is meet Cyrano de Bergerac, which of course Barclay, I believe, met him and then played him in a play in The Next Generation. And again in this episode, there was a character who tried to make himself smart to save the day, just like Barclay did. But the A plot is Boimler and Mariner taking out and fixing different isolinear cores in what appears to be the shield generator. And it's a lot of work, and they don't want to do it. And Fletcher offers to take the rest of the shift on his own so that Mariner and Boimler can go to a choo-choo show. I don't have a clue what this is. Am I supposed to know? Am I supposed to know what choo-choo is? I felt like I was supposed to know what that was, but I didn't have a clue. So they go to this show. Fletcher is exhausted with the work, and he takes one of the cores back to his bunk with him, and he decides to hook it up to his brain with some type of helmet, and it's something right out of Spock's brain. If you've seen that episode of TOS, it's ridiculous and not believable even by Star Trek standards, but he tries to upload the core computer into his brain to become smarter, to do the job faster. But what happens is he accidentally uploads his brain into the core, and the core turns into a semi-sentient robotic creature that is absorbing different parts of the Cerritos into it, which the way it was presented was funny, even if it didn't make much sense. This episode was very much about the creations of our crew members going wild on them. And at the end of the A-plot, the creature that Fletcher creates basically escapes out an airlock, or is forced into an airlock. And then that creature takes care of the Drukemani vessel, creating an interesting no-fault victory for the bridge crew, solving the bridge plot by having that creature stop the Drukemani, which was funny, and earned Fletcher a promotion, and a transfer to the Titan at the end, by the way. But the B-plot, I thought, was actually a little bit better this time. The B-plots have been bad so far, but this is my favorite B-plot yet. It involves Tendi and Rutherford in a classic holodeck failure episode. But what happens is Tendi is worried about having to do a spacewalk to recover the salvage. And ultimately she decides that she needs better training on how to do a spacewalk because she never actually passed that at the academy. Rutherford offers to show her his training program. They go in, and Rutherford has created this character, BADGIE, who is just a Starfleet badge that is like a training avatar type character who will walk you through training. And as the ship gets beaten to death by debris by the Drukemani, the holodeck glitches up, and basically the safety protocols are turned off, and BADGIE turns into a homicidal maniac, which I thought was funny. I mean, it was a little bit crass. Some of the lines were a little bit cringe, but ultimately it was funny enough for me. And to see a Starfleet badge beating up on officers like that, it was pretty cute. But, I mean, ultimately, like I said before, the A-plot solves the bridge plot and the B-plot in this episode. And once that happens and the Drukemani are stopped, the ship systems auto-repair, and the holodeck returns to normal, and Tendi and Rutherford go about their business. I mean, these B-plots, they go nowhere, and they solve nothing. Terminal provocations. The naming scheme for these episodes is a little weird, don't you think? They seem to not really be on the nose. They take a little bit of thought to understand what they mean, and I guess that's pretty cool. I would say that it's interesting that the crew refers to Dr. T'Ana as just a cat. Fletcher calls her just a cat in a coat, which I thought wasn't very nice. I don't think Caitians like being called just cats. That was kind of odd to me. But now I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but one of the characters mentions that something has a backup of a backup. Is that a subtle reference to that time where Miles O'Brien on Deep Space Nine said that everything in Starfleet has a triple backup, like a backup has a backup? And I believe he's saying that to a Cardassian, and he's talking about the differences in safety protocol between Starfleet station design and Cardassian station design. You know, Deep Space Nine being Terok Nor. Was that intentional? Was that a reference? Those are the kind of references that I like. I don't like name drops. Flat name drops sprinkled in just as flavor text. I don't like it. It's stupid. It's a cheap way to win over fans who spent a minute on Wikipedia or Memory Alpha. I believe I spotted NCC 502. Certainly an old vessel, and I think I saw its nacelle too. Looking pretty cool. Looks very canon to me. It looks like that nacelle really could have been attached to a vessel that said NCC 502. You know? Good job, guys. Mariner has improved a lot in this episode. She wasn't nearly annoying or as useless. And she had some good speeches. And she was very nice to Boimler in this episode, really. Big improvement. At the end of this episode, Shax the Bajoran bridge commander guy. Or is he a lieutenant? I'm not sure. But anyway, he's the tactical officer. At the end of the day, he gives Dr. Tana a congratulatory kiss out of nowhere. Where's that going? Am I mistaken, or did Rutherford's Vulcan cyborg prosthetic originally give him Vulcan fighting techniques? Where was that in this episode? When he was fighting BADGIE, he seemed not to be able to fight it off in just on the ground with simple maneuvers. He seemed to not have any kind of Vulcan, techniques left. Like, what happened? He took down those Borgs in a simulation devised by Shax in the first or second episode. Did he not? So, in conclusion, I'd say this episode was formulaic but funny, light-hearted, but again had an interesting quandary with aliens. That's really cool. We saw some cool aliens, and we saw their ship. What more could I want? I'm a ship guy. I like the ships. I like to design things. I was happy. Maybe you were happy too. 7 out of 10. Alright. I'm Lieutenant Mark. Signing out. Getting back to my station here on the U.S.S. Dingwall. See you later.